Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're doing something a little different, a bit more specialized.
Very specialized.
We're taking one single piece of political communication. It's a social media post that got a lot of traction, and we're putting it under a microscope.
Right. And the goal isn't just to say, this is right or this is wrong.
No, we want to do a full structural forensic audit. We want to quantify how it fails and turn what feels like a qualitative assertion into, well, cold, hard statistics.
That's the key. We're moving beyond the simple fact check. We're asking, what are the actual building blocks of this argument? Are they even sound to begin with?
And the argument is a big one. It involves huge numbers. A specific claim of $200 billion, all tied to the housing market, mortgage rates, and this is the core of it, presidential power over institutions like Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac.
Exactly. The narrative is powerful because it's so direct. It essentially says, housing affordability was destroyed, but I have a simple, direct fix.
A very clean solution. I can lower mortgage rates by taking $200 billion from Fannie and Freddie, the GSEs, and just have my people go buy up mortgage bonds.
And that simplicity, that's the tell. That's what signals that there might be some serious incoherence under the hood. So our method was to be really rigorous. We dissected the post claim by claim. Every single factual assertion, every causal link became a unit of analysis.
So not just looking at the big picture, but every little piece.
Every piece. The goal wasn't just to see if the facts were wrong, but to catalog exactly where the logic fails on legal grounds, institutional grounds, and, just basic math.
Okay, so given how smooth that narrative sounds on the surface, I have a feeling your inventory complicated things pretty quickly. What did the raw numbers tell you?
The volume of assertions was, frankly, shocking. In this relatively short post, we identified 14 distinct, specific, and falsifiable claims.
14 in one post.
14. That's almost one major claim every, 10 or 15 words. It's incredibly dense.
And what about the accuracy? I mean, usually in these kinds of communications, even the most slanted ones, there's a kernel of truth somewhere to anchor the argument.
You would hope so. You really would. But here's the single most definitive finding from this whole audit.
Okay.
Out of those 14 distinct claims, we found zero claims that were fully accurate and properly contextualized.
Wow. Not one.
Not a single one.
0 out of 14.
That doesn't feel like random sloppiness. That suggests there's a real intent in how the message was built.
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
I mean, let's just break it down. 6 of the claims, that's 43%, were just objectively false. They fly in the face of established law or public data.
Okay.
Another 6, so the other 43%, we categorized as misleading or distorted. They might use a shred of truth, but they twist the causality or strip out all the context, which makes the statement functionally false.
So that's 86% of the content that's either outright false or deliberately misleading. What about the rest? The remaining claims, well, they fell into a category we called unverifiable or evidence-free. Things like, this is already happening, or, crucially, using these huge, specific dollar amounts without any source, any pathway, just numbers plucked from thin air.
That's just a devastating scorecard.
Yeah.
You mentioned a metric, credibility density. Can you break that down for us? Because that feels key.
Think of it like this. It's the concentration of errors per word. We calculated that the rate of false or misleading claims in this post was somewhere between 22 and 25% per 100 words.
25%. That sounds high, but what does that mean in context?
It means it's running at 3 to 4 times the recognized alert level. In professional journalism, you start getting really concerned when the error rate goes past, say, 5 to 7%.
Because at that point, the reader's working too hard to sort fact from fiction.
Exactly. You spend more energy debunking than you do absorbing information. At 25%, the content is overwhelmingly noise. It's so densely misleading by design that there's no accurate anchor for you to hold on to.
So the numbers prove the density of the error. But let's shift to the structural side of it. This is where, for me, it gets really fascinating. Because the claims don't just use wrong numbers. They propose things that are impossible. You call this institutional illiteracy.
Yes, we found 5 claims that failed, not because the facts were a little off, but because they showed a fundamental misunderstanding of how the U.S. government and its financial systems actually work.
And the main errors were about Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac's GSEs.
The whole thing hinged on them. The Post claims that because the speaker didn't sell them, they're now worth many times more and have this $200 billion in cash just sitting there ready to be used. That entire idea is built on a complete misunderstanding of their legal status. The reality is, Fannie and Freddie have been under federal conservatorship since 2008.
Can you explain what that means?
Sure. Think of it like this. A normal company is like a house you own. You can sell it, you can take money out of it. A conservatorship is when the government puts that house into a protected trust managed by someone else entirely, the Federal Housing Finance Agency.
So they're basically in financial timeout run by a regulator.
Precisely. They are wards of the state. The money they make, and they have been very profitable, generally gets swept straight to the U.S. Treasury. It's not sitting in some slush fund an executive can just tap into.
So the idea that there's $200 billion in deployable cash is just false.
It's structurally false. It misunderstands the legal reality. It's like saying you can withdraw money from a protected trust just because you know the guy who set it up. You can't.
That one constraint makes the whole premise impossible. But it goes further. The Post then says the president can order his representatives to use this non-existent money to buy mortgage-backed securities, or MBS.
Yeah, MBS are just big bundles of home loans packaged up and sold as investments. The Post is basically saying the president can order a massive intervention in that market to force rates down.
And can he?
No, that's the second huge structural failure. We call it an illegitimate authority claim.
Okay.
Large-scale purchases of MBS, the kind that actually move national interest rates. That is strictly the job of the Federal Reserve.
And the Federal Reserve is?
Independent, by law. A president cannot legally order the Fed to buy bonds. That's a decision made by a vote of the Federal Open Market Committee. The claim relies on powers the Speaker simply does not have. It's a non-starter.
So the Post just erases the independence of the central bank and ignores the legal status of the GSEs. It just replaces this complex system with one person giving an order.
Exactly. And it does it a third time, too, when it talks about what caused the problem in the first place. The Post says a past administration destroyed affordability.
Right, but what were the actual drivers our sources point to?
The main ones were the Fed, again, the independent Fed raising rates to fight inflation. Then you had pandemic supply chain issues and local zoning rules that stopped new houses from being built.
So it ignores the Fed, Congress, supply chains, local government.
It ignores every real actor and just creates a single villain. So if you add it all up, about 36% of the entire communication rests on asserting powers that the Speaker doesn't possess. The whole policy is non-viable.
It just cannot work within our current legal framework.
Not even in principle.
Okay, that brings us to Section 3, which is maybe the most revealing part. How this thing was constructed. Because, as you said, random ignorance makes random errors. These errors are all pointed in the same direction.
They are directionally consistent. And we found 3 clear patterns that suggest this was deliberate engineering, not a simple misunderstanding.
What's the first one?
False precision. It's the use of that very exact number. $200 billion with no source, no audit, no mechanism.
It sounds official, though. It has the ring of a Treasury report.
That's the trick. It gives this illusion of expertise, making you think, wow, they must have the data. We found 2 instances of these big percent numbers used just for rhetorical effect with nothing behind them.
And the second pattern, institutional erasure. We've touched on this, but let's just list the actors who had to be written out of the story for it to work.
The list is long. You have to erase the Federal Reserve, the most powerful player. You have to erase Congress, which sets the legal limits. You have to erase the Treasury's constraints on the GSEs. And you have to erase basic market forces like inflation.
You create a vacuum where only one person's will matters.
Which leads right to the third pattern, single actor causality. We call it the hero narrative.
Right.
When you erase every constraint, the entire complex housing market gets reduced to one person's decisions. The Post uses I or my decision a staggering 7 times. It takes credit for everything good and claims unilateral power to fix everything bad.
So if you connect those dots for the listener, the errors aren't random. They consistently inflate the Speaker's power, they erase all constraints, and they support this narrative of total control.
The entire output is optimized for persuasion, not for information or policy.
Which brings us to the conclusion. After all this analysis, what's the final verdict?
The verdict is firmly, mostly false, and we're about 90% confident in that. The claim is non-viable. It fails at every single layer. The numbers are wrong, the institutions are misrepresented, the authority is made up, and the cause and effect is flawed.
So in plain language, how should someone listening to this think about that post if they see it?
In plain language, this isn't just a little wrong or partly true. It is densely misleading by its very construction. We calculated a persuasion versus information ratio, and our assessment is that it's about 90% persuasion and maybe 10% actual content.
It's a campaign message.
It's pure messaging. It's not a description of an actionable legal economic policy. It uses the right jargon MBS, GSEs to sound plausible, but the whole thing just dissolves under the slightest scrutiny.
What this deep dive shows is that you don't just have to say it's wrong. You can prove it could not be right in our system.
And that's the final takeaway for you, the listener. When you're evaluating claims about these huge, complex systems finance, government structural knowledge is your best defense. Once you understand the hard constraints, like the Fed's independence or what a conservatorship is.
You force the speaker into a corner.
Exactly. They have three moves. They can accept the constraints, which means their original claim was wrong. They can retreat into vague promises. Or they can reject reality itself and insist they have powers that settled law says they don't.
And seeing which path they choose tells you everything you need to know about what you're really reading. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.
A real pleasure.
Until next time, stay curious and keep questioning the structures.